Wholeness, everybody. This is the Need to Know Crosstalk show. It's been a little while. My name is Zeke Dorset. It's really, really good to be on the show. I have a beautiful, amazing guest. His name is Mr. Brendon Jones with me today. And we're going to have just a really good time. It's going to be really nice sharing this space. We've had this on hold for a little while now. And, first of all, how are you, Brendon? It's nice to have you here. Thank you for being here with us.
I'm wonderful, Zeke. Thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoy speaking, and I really enjoy sharing what I know to others. I think that's the only way we can keep any of the great gifts that we've been given is by sharing it. So having this opportunity is very great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. I've got that Eastern saying in my head, which I can never remember to the word, but it's about keeping the cup empty. I'm sure you probably know it, and that's kind of where we're at today, or what you were aspiring to when you were by being on the show today. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to plucking your brain and siphoning that knowledge of yours. And sorry, laptop playing up, and just again, just enjoying the space. It's been a little while, like I said, and wow. We were sharing a little bit just before we got on the show, actually, about it being quite a busy sort of time of the year. It is for me, it is for you. I've got a few things going on behind the scenes, and I know you're very busy yourself. So, yeah, please let everyone know who you are, what you're up to, what you're engaged in at the moment, and we'll roll into this. So please, yeah.
Very good. So I'm somebody who, just to give a very quick background of where I come from, I grew up in Georgia, the state of Georgia in the United States, right outside the city of Atlanta. And during that time, I grew up in a Baptist household. We were part of a church called the First Baptist Church of Woodstock, which is now one of the biggest churches in the eastern side of the United States. Huge mega church. And I was a very devout kid. I was somebody who I read the Bible up and down every day. I definitely had this feeling that there was some sort of like great energy, great intelligence, which watched over me and kind of gave me everything I had. I always thought I had the best life in the world. Even though behind the scenes I was unaware there was a lot of turmoil going on with my family and my neighbors and really everywhere. Everyone I knew was actually hiding a lot of suffering that they were going through. I was just very naive, and I thought I had the greatest life in the world. So I, after about 10 years of living what you call like an upper middle class life, reality just kind of hit all at once. You know, my mom wakes me and my brother up at like 3 a.m, gets us in a van, and we drive off to Texas. And I'm like, what's going on? Where are we going? She's like, well, we have to leave now. And I'm like, okay. And when that shook my reality, that was kind of when I started to question everything. I was like, have I been talking to God this whole time, or have I just been talking to myself in my head? Or is there even really a difference? So I had those questions all throughout life. I was homeschooled as a child, so I was not exposed to I guess you would say, the cruelty or the meanness that this society can sometimes have when things kind of get a little rough. So when I got into public school, the first thing somebody said to me was, do you have anorexia? And I say, I don't know what that is. And they just look at me and start laughing. And it took me a couple weeks to realize these people were trying to pick on me. So that's when I realized that not everybody was very nice and loving like the Bible says you're supposed to be. So more and more I start to expose myself to the general lifestyle of Western societies. This is Texas. This is suburban Texas. And as I start to go on, I start to develop a more and more materialistic way of seeing life. If any of y'all were familiar with Sevan Bomar and his story, I have a very similar story to his. I wasn't quite into like spiritual knowledge as he was, but I was very philosophical child. I was someone who always inquired and asked the deep questions. In Sunday school, I used to ask, God doesn't have a mom? You know, that stinks. That's got to be pretty lonely. Or, you know, the questions like, am I talking to Jesus or am I talking to myself in my head? And how do I know the difference? So over time, as I was not getting the answers that I wanted, or at least answers that were fulfilling, just kind of getting brushed off, I started to develop a more materialistic view until eventually I said, well, maybe I'll just become a scientist and I'll figure out how all this works. Because if I don't know how this all works, I don't want to be here anymore. If I'm just blindly here and there's no meaning to my existence, then I really just don't want to go on with this anymore. There's too much suffering happening to really justify it. So I went to University of Texas and I studied physics. I studied particle physics and quantum physics. And I was there for a few years, and I would ask my professors a lot of questions I had about what about the pyramids and how did we build those, and like how does information travel? If there's light is information, then what about light we receive from outside of this planet? And what about all these things? And again, I was brushed off. And when I asked my very close professor, who is actually a good friend of mine, I asked him, so how do we what is it that we actually know about reality? Like, what is it that we know that's actually real and that we know for certain doesn't change? And he said, I have no idea. We have no idea. We have nothing like that. Space, maybe, but we don't know anything about space. And I kind of had a mental breakdown. I said, well, if people in my church can't figure it out and the scientists figure it out, then who, the smartest people in the world supposedly doesn't know anything, how are we all pretending like everything's okay? Because I can't pretend anymore. And I just gave up. And as soon as I gave up, I received a message. I received like a sign. So my great-grandfather had, God bless his heart, he passed away a few days before I went to this big, like what you call now like health and wellness expos, or like these like metaphysical like expos they have now, where they have like, you know, readers and they have people selling oils and stuff like that. He passed away, and I was actually pretty happy because he was super old and his body was failing, and I was like, well, he's free now. I at least had an idea of like, well, whoever he was is gone because his body is just not him. It's not who he is. So wherever he is, he's doing better, hopefully. And I went to this convention a couple of days after he died, and a woman calls me from across the building, probably like 50 feet, just all the way across the building, yelling like, hey, come here. And I say, what? Who are you? She says, Pablo won't stop talking to me. Pablo's telling me to talk to you. And Pablo was the name of my great-grandfather. And when she started saying that, she said, he keeps saying mijo, mijo. Like, what is this? What does this mean? And mijo means son in Spanish. And that's what my great-grandfather always called me. So after that happened, I just started bawling. I just started to break down, started crying. And the woman is telling me, I know this is all very new for you, but, and she was a Reiki master. So she was a Reiki healer, and she read tarot cards, and she just did the services that she could for others. And she told me, she said, you're going to be doing this. In fact, you are in comparison to me, you are a master at this. And I said, what? That doesn't make any sense. I've never done this before. How could I possibly be a master? She's like, well, that's assuming this is your first go around. And that's when I really started hammering in on the spiritual knowledge. I just got I got every book I could get my hands on. I read about reincarnation. I read about all the religions. I read about our many different ideas of our history that are not taught in the public. You know, I've read about energy healing, meditation, third eye, the organs, you know, the physiology. Right now I'm studying psychology. That's really a big one for getting through all this. And over time, I started to take her advice more and more on doing the practices. So I started with Reiki. I did my Reiki training. I got my mastership. And after I got my mastership, it just kind of took off from there. I started exploring with mantra and how words and these vibrations really help bring a healing space to others. And then I met my master in a Tantra study group. So a lot of people think of Tantra, they think of, you know, sex and all that, but Tantras are actually texts. They're actually instruction manuals on how to do certain things that make the body respond in a way where you cultivate high amounts of energy. So I met him in a study group, and he's basically looked exactly like me, except he's brown. But he just looked just like me, and he's like, hello, brother, how are you? Good to see you again. I'm like, who are you? I don't know who you are. I've never met you before. He's like, you were my master in a past life, and now I am yours. And then when I die and I come back, you will be mine. And this will go on. And you know, when these kind of things happen, I give it the benefit of the doubt. And I say, okay, yeah, sure. And then he starts, you know, the synchronicities start to happen. And next, I mean, it's hard to put into words, but it's like miracles happen. And he starts teaching me about mantra. He starts teaching me about bhakti, about devotion to God, which means devotion to the whole of creation, and not just being devoted to yourself and to your small way of thinking. And that when you release yourself from the small way of thinking and really open yourself up to the whole thing, that's sustainable happiness. That's absolute reality. The absolute reality is the thing which all else emanates from. It's the causeless cause. And in Sanskrit, his name is Krishna. Krishna means the all-attractive principle, the all-attractive one. And he is the supreme personality of Godhead, with which all the other devas, angels, demigods, great beings emanate from, and with which they come back into when creation has come and gone, and will continue to for all eternity. And teaching me this philosophy, now I'm just in a space where I'm continually increasing my own happiness and bringing more happiness to others through my service and my work, which includes like energy healing. I do readings for people. I do tarot cards. Some people like them, some people don't. But it's really through here. It's really through seeing the mirror in others. I write. I currently moving my website over somewhere else. So really right now where I'm at is I'm just doing everything that I can and sharing what I know to help people, give people some sort of context and help them along the path. Right now, lately, it's been working a lot on simplifying this whole spirituality thing because we got Gaia TV now. It's basically become like media at this point, and it can be really confusing. Same thing with diet. All the like various things that are supposed to be very simple in our lives are now very complicated. So I'm trying to simplify those things for people so that they don't feel afraid to actually just do something for themselves. Because this information has gotten to the point where people are either getting way ahead of themselves, which I can say personally I did for at least 3 years, of just like, you learn about all this advanced knowledge when you don't even have the basics down, like, and or you just are too afraid to start even do anything because you just learn too much information too quickly and you haven't given yourself time to process it. So my primary work right now is simplifying that for people and giving them something tangible to experience to give them the confidence to move forward. So I would say that's primarily my work at this point, and that's where I'm at right now because it's still very much a learning process for me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much for that intro. That was very deep, very colourful, really. I just painted a picture, really, in my brain. Everything you were saying just gave me an idea of who you are. Quite a lot of depth there. And there's a few areas that we'll definitely cover in this chat. Those being the, we'll talk a little bit about the scriptures and religions, and definitely about spirituality, obviously, and some of the areas that you cover within your works, and how that balance of, which we shared before the show, of being vulnerable and being in that space where you're willing and able to learn and grow, has put you in a position now and to master, to grow, to excel, to be able to help others. It's something that I keep deep to my heart, which I'm still learning as I go. Is it's a little saying that, which is, I say this to myself, I have to be selfish in my reality to become selfless and help others. And it means a lot to me, because like the act of being selfish, people hear selfish and just think that they'll paint a picture and not really know where you're coming from with that. But actually, to actually be in my own space and look after myself, which is something that I haven't done very well for most of my life. I can be honest with that. Actually being able to be in my space and allow myself to grow and learn and I was going to say fail. I don't know if that's the right word, but to look at my flaws, perhaps, you know what I mean, and be able to actually accept where I am. You can only be in that space. You can only grow if you're in that space. I'm beginning to realise is actually that's being in the now today. So yeah, I got a lot from what you said there, brother. But that being said, let's move forward. I'm really intrigued with the scriptures and religion. Now, bear with me. Now, you are quite a religious individual, and I have to say I've got a few things here. I am nowhere near. I'm nowhere near on your level. I know that one day I probably will find the time to be able to read. This is just a handful of things that I've got. I'm no big reader as of yet, but I haven't touched base into that yet properly.
That's the one right there that you have in your hand. If you have that one book, you are set for life. I'm telling people right now, like, they
resonated with me.
Supplementary to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because it talks about the absolute truth. And the absolute truth, it's actually very simple. The absolute truth is we are individual soul, and Krishna is the name for the supreme soul, or the oversoul, as Bomar would put it, or the Paramatma in the heart, is said in Sanskrit. And the soul is at its most blissful position when it is subordinate to the oversoul. What that means is when the soul is connected to its oversoul and taking direct downloads and information from the oversoul, that is when it's in its blissful existence. When we suffer, we are cut off from that connection, or we, due to all the mental substratum, it appears that we are cut off. It appears that we are very separated. And so the act of devotion is devoting yourself to that connection, so that it's basically building a desire to awaken to that connection again, and to be what they call God realized, or realizing that you are an emanation of the absolute truth. And it's foolproof, and every true spiritual tradition teaches this. Every true spirituality will at least at some point lead to this truth. May not say at the beginning. They might say nature, they might say, I am God or whatever. But those are actually just steps to the path of realizing the totality.
That's beautiful, beautifully said. Like I've shared, I've even got one of these which I'm yet to decipher. But I will look into it, and I've got, it's all good. My mind is set in the sense that I know this, as much as I'm not personally religious in that sort of manner. There's a lot of information in these areas, that
yes,
have a lot of meaning, and there's things to be unlocked if you can understand, as we say, what they're actually going on about, which is all in here. We are,
yes.
as to my personal understanding of what's going on. So your work is very, very important. I'm very glad that I've been able to pick this topic up from scriptures, religion. So you were young. You were brought up in a Catholic home, as you said. Am I right? Sorry, did you say Catholic?
Baptist.
Yeah, Baptist. Sorry. And I love the story you shared when you went into school and you became exposed to the. I wouldn't want to call it the real world, because that's not.
Yeah, it's the fake matrix. It's not real. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the overlay, call it that, of what you had this idea of what we should be like, or what the world should be like, and people, and then you came out into this fruit medley salad of human beings that are just kind of like, I don't know, just made up.
Yeah.
And where I'm going with this is that did religion kind of set you up? How did religion set you up? What were the pros, what were the cons? Because to me, it sounds like it kind of put you in a position of vulnerability again, where you were almost, I don't want to blame it on religion, because it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's coming out the wrong way. So I'll just say it straight, and we'll word it round it. But I guess religion sort of showed you a way through text and through the individuals that you were having in your space, in your reality at the time, family and people at church and whatever else. But then when you came into that reality, it was a complete 180, call it that. Did religion have its emphasis on you, if that's the right word? Did it set you up in that way where you might not have been ready, or did it set you up for failure, perhaps? Or
Right. Okay. Yeah, I know what you're saying. So the Gita actually addresses this. The Gita says all man's suffering is due to lack of knowledge. So where I grew up, the system that I learned was, if you believe that Jesus Christ is your savior, then you will be saved. So it essentially stopped at belief. And that is where I was on unstable ground at that point.
Right.
Because what I believed to be true and what was actually true were two different things. And so what caused me my suffering was not what was, it was my mind distressed that it wasn't how I thought it was.
With you.
So, for example, one big scripture in John, chapter 14, verse 12 says, "Behold, my child, you will do greater works than I." But when I went to church, they defined that as preaching the gospel and telling other people about the religion. And when I tried to do that, I realized these people don't want this. They don't want me to tell them these things. So while I'm trying to believe what you're saying, it's not actually true. Or they pretend to like vibe with what I'm saying and then still go on doing what it is they want to do. And I sat there saying, well, I can't get mad at these people because they have their own choices to make. So why am I believing that it's so important to tell other people about this when the big questions I had for my teachers at the time couldn't answer? So how could I can't possibly answer them? So I might need to turn somewhere else to find the truth. And the reality of it was, religion is a set of regulatory principles that are designed to keep you from making big mistakes that can stray you on the path for lifetimes. That was what they were designed for. So, for example, Christianity, if you grew up 1,500, 2,000 years ago, and somebody told you this is the only way, they were probably right. Because you wouldn't encounter another tradition in your lifetime. You wouldn't leave where most people were not traveling far and wide. They were staying in their village, they were staying in their city. They would go to market once a year, at least in the Hebrew area. So if they told you this is the only way to salvation, they were pretty much right. But now we have so much access to information that it actually is dogma, because God really rests in our heart. And whether we read one book or another book is not really as important as if we turn inward rather than look outside for that which is permanent. So I was looking outside for what was permanent. I was looking at ideas to be something that was permanent, but my mind was constantly changing. So it took years and years of me to keep falling down to see that it's not about like being right. It's about being complete. And the times where most people would say that religion failed me was when they were trying to be right. So when I was trying to be right, I wasn't happy. And so at that time, I did blame religion. I kind of had a little tantrum. I was kind of mad at the church and kind of upset that I said they did this to me. They taught me all these things. When in reality, I didn't have to accept anything they said, but I was just kind of upset with myself that I accepted things that weren't actually true,
Right.
Which is not anybody else's fault but mine.
Yeah. I'm really, really glad that you worded it in exactly that way. The end result was the exposure, how you became weaved into this ideology, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, it came back to the self. The fact that you actually recognize that every single part of it, your actions, your options, are all from you and only you, you know, like, and totally, you're totally right. Yeah, the world we live in today is so, well, it's so expansive, and the information we have readily available, it just makes things definitely a lot more difficult, easier. It's everything rolled into one. It's quite,
Yep.
it's quite, it's luxury. It's luxurious in a way, but at the same time, it's just unbelievably daunting with so much information out there. And we were sharing before the show, you know, is there not a line? Is there not a platform? Is there not a level grounding where the masses as a whole, being the same species, can actually walk on this specific road that involves, should we say, all aspects of what religions and spirituality as a whole encompasses and is trying to get at, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, which is actually trying to unlock yourself and recognize that you are complete, as you rightly said, and are everything, in a sense.
Yes.
You are already it. What you've been looking for, what everything you need is already you. And that's something that I'm definitely still learning and trying to soak in and trying to become accustomed to in this life.
And to answer your question, I would say yes. And in my opinion, that what you're talking about, what is it that is universal that everyone can do? That is devotion. That is bhakti. So that's devoting everything that you do, everything that you think, to the whole, rather than to just yourself. Because the whole of creation is what you call Krishna. It's what you call God. It's what you call Christ. It's what you call. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things what you call it, but what's important is that you call it something that's not. It's not subjugated to our weaknesses. So when we try to put our faith in our human self, we have flaws. We're just born with what we call flaws. We're not 100% on. So rather than rely on ourselves, we rely on the perfected being, which already exists and which always exists and will always continue to exist. And that's essentially the path of devotion. Devotion is doing everything that you do normally, but doing it for God rather than doing it for yourself. And you know, God is a very touchy word for people. I know for me, it brought me some pain, because when I think of God, I thought of my old church and I thought of all those memories associated with that. But you know, we call him spirit, we call him oversoul. If you want to say it like that, is devoting everything that you do to the oversoul, the Param Atman, as it's called. There's Atman self, and then there's Param Atman, which means the greatest self, the great self. And those two are one and the same. However, everything in nature has a hierarchy.
Right.
Everything in nature is actually according to a hierarchy. So according to the hierarchy, there's the individual soul, and then there's the oversoul. And then what most people call the oversoul is really a group soul. And then the group souls are manifested by the absolute, the supreme being, which in the Vedic Scriptures is called Krishna, or the Christ, or that really means the crystal. The crystal is the perfect being. Imagine a crystal with billions of faces on it.
Right.
Each one of us are a face on that crystal. So we are no different from it. However, we're not the totality of it. And if we try to tell ourselves we're the totality, we'll always disappoint ourselves. We're always going to say that we didn't do enough because we're not perfect like that. But we're striving for perfection. And in my opinion, that's the game of life. It's called Leela in Sanskrit. It means the divine play. perfection of life, constantly getting better at life, mastery at life is very enjoyable to me. So it doesn't have to be very serious. There's a lot of spiritual traps out there about like achieving some sort of spiritual, like some sort of spiritual platform, like achieving some sort of state of consciousness. It's not about achievement. Because that's selling yourself very short. That's some sort of comparison. You're actually comparing yourself to an old version of yourself. And while it helps at the beginning, it's my opinion a little childish. It's more so about cultivating happiness and lasting joy that can be shared with other people, because that you never lose. And that is not dependent on your state of consciousness, whether you're spiritual or not.
I love that. I'm going to take that away with me. That really sort of hit home when you said it's not about achieving. And I get that. I sense that energy, especially in my reality. It's not very dull, but I don't have many individuals close to hand that share this this space, so like we're sharing on topics like this so much. It's more definitely sort of social media based. Hopefully that will change in time, but I definitely get that sense that there is a lot of achievers out there, which is not, it's not a good or bad thing. I'm not justifying saying I'm better or anything. It's just actually recognizing where I am and the space that I want to be in or want to share my space with. Like I was sharing before the show, I find myself regularly having to detox my account, and that's not because I don't like people or love people. It's what is naturally, what just feels humble, being around specific types of energy. Sorry, which is allowing me to grow. You know, it's almost giving me a leg up without actually asking for anything from me, and there's not many out there that are like that.
Right.
It's definitely more of a strive for achievement that I seem to get from a lot of people out there, which is cool. That's their journey.
Yeah, my master actually sent me a quote yesterday. He said, "Om Namo Narayana." People who live a spiritual life and people who live a worldly life live in two different worlds. Spiritual people understand the people of the world and why people act in a certain way, whereas people of the world will never understand a spiritual person as they're so filled with the outside world. And what you're talking about with social media is that's kind of how it is. You know, it says in the Gita that devotees or those on the path only ought to associate with other devotees, because not to condemn others, but others will inherently contaminate the mental space of the devotee simply because they are not, they lack knowledge, and their perspective is one that is clouded. So if you try to share, and the word that they use is, do not share sentiments with people who are not devotees. That doesn't mean you don't talk to them or don't love them. You actually serve them. Your mission is to serve them and to share with them Krishna consciousness, share with them God consciousness as much as you possibly can. But you're not being buddy-buddy with them, because being buddy-buddy with them is actually enabling them to continue their behavior.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make you a bad person. You know, if I take care of children all the time. If a child throws a temper tantrum, the last thing I'm going to do is acknowledge them. I'm going to let them, I'm just going to move them, tell them, all right, you know, just go over there, throw your fit, and when you've composed yourself enough, then come to me, and then we'll talk about what happened. And when you tell that to a child, it makes them understand that I don't have to have an emotional reaction to have my needs met.
Right.
Right? Because children are trained to, if they cry, they get what they want. So basically they're being trained to have an emotional reaction just to have their needs fulfilled. And in my opinion, that's not necessary. Your emotions should go into your devotion. It shouldn't really go into having your needs met, because God's already fulfilling your needs. Your needs are met. Like, you don't have to do any extra work. It's supplied for you. It's supplied for every being on this planet.
Nice, nice. Beautifully said, brother. Honestly, really, really nice. Let's talk a little bit about vulnerability. That's a very, very interesting topic. Where to start with it? It's to my understanding that where I am at this present moment, and a few years just gone, from 2015 really onwards, July 2015, I'm recollecting and looking into my past, I've realised that actually vulnerability has been an asset really to my growth, in the sense that if it wasn't for me being in particular situations or places or people, that I wouldn't have learned or wouldn't have been able to have become accustomed to whatever it may have been that I've sort of taken on board today. Examples could be, for example, I went to AA when I tried to change the way I feel with drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. And I had a journey in AA for a while, which served its purpose. I no longer do it now. I naturally just feel like I just outgrew it, I reckon. I kind of felt like it was stopping me from growing, personally, but that's just my personal opinion. But I became very vulnerable in that position, because for the first time ever, I and many others that were around me in those group rooms and stuff kind of had a mutual agreement, call it may, where we kind of accepted that we were not in control of our lives. And that's a very horrible place to be. That's a very, very difficult thing to say and accept to oneself, that you are not in control of your life. And I can say 100% now, not that it is 100%, but there are times still in my life where I'm dealing with emotions or ideas or old programs that can take me a couple of steps back in my growth or whatever it may be. But with vulnerability, let's just stick to the question here. How has vulnerability played out in your life before you touch base deeply with spirituality, and how do you use it as a weapon of your spiritual arsenal today to help yourself and help others? Because I think it's something very, very important for us to be able to step outside of that box that we can keep ourselves in very, very easily, that comfort zone. So yeah, vulnerability. Jump on it, please, Brendon.
Yes, I grew up with a father who also was going through that sort of thing with drugs and AA and all that. And what I took out of it was, to me, the distressful part is not I'm not in control of my life, but the distressful part is it's bad that I'm not in control of my life. I'm a bad person because I'm not in control. I learned very early on that I've never been in control of my life, ever. Ever, like when you're a kid, you do what your parents say. Like you don't have any say. You don't even have any say what you have for your next meal. Like everything is done by another agent, and you're the receiver. And it says this in the scriptures: recognize that I, Krishna, I am the doer, and that I am also the enjoyer, and that you are a spark of my emanation. So what that essentially means is that while we might think that we're doing things, what's actually happening is that we're manifesting and we're attracting these experiences, right? So these experiences are actually coming to us. There's not anything that we do to make them happen. And being vulnerable is accepting the fact that we attract experiences to us. We do not do experience. When you do experience, that's the mind trying to control things, saying it has to be like this and this and this. But the mind has no ability to control anything. I cannot control what my neighbor does. I cannot control the wind. I can't control anything else. The only thing that I can do, though, is, and which is really the basis of all what you hear of like law of attraction, etc., is change my vibration by changing my state of being and attracting new experiences to me. I mean, and you know, this kind of goes back to etymology and the meaning of words. Like, we do have control over our lives, but it's not in the way that you think, right? So we have the ability to make decisions. It also says in the Gita that every single being is given independence. So he can choose to follow God or not. He can choose to do this or do that. He has the ability to choose. But what we don't have control over our lives is, for example, there's a law of gravity on me. And I can't choose to just say, okay, I'm not going to follow gravity today. I'm just going to go fly off and then come back later. We don't have that ability. So you know, it can get very cumbersome when you're dealing with words in terms of how you're defining things. But what makes our mind happy is not having to think that we have to control things. And so when I was a child, the vulnerability came in when my parents were fighting a lot, and I didn't really know what to do. And every time I would try to do something, it's like I made it worse or something like that. You know, like they would be fighting and I would say, hey, let's not fight anymore. And they'd be like, you don't know what's going on. And I'm like, well, you're right. And so I would go back and I'd say, you know, the problems are there, but when I just let go and I have fun like I normally do, it kind of doesn't like affect me anymore. And so, you know, I would just go outside or something like that. And then they would end up, and they learned the same thing. They learned, like, when we let bygones be bygones and we just allow each other to be how we are, then we actually see that we're actually very vulnerable. We actually just want to heal. We don't really want anything out of the other person. So I always had that idea since I was young that I don't have control of my life. And I really like it that way, because if I were having to be responsible for all the factors of my life, I'd be pretty stressed. If I had to think, if I had to, like, imagine having to cue your thoughts.
Yeah, done.
Have them in just how much work that would be. I'm very glad I don't have to do that. When you know, and of course, like, kind of in my teen years, I kind of grew this egotism that I had control. It was an illusion of control. And it justifies you getting angry and upset whenever things don't go the way you want them to. And I had to have enough disappointment to realize that I was just choosing to be how I wanted to be. I could choose to be happy, or I could choose to be upset or angry. And it's just the forces of habit that make it so I fall into one or the other. And so I have to cultivate one habit and not feed another one. And when I work with my clients now, I focus very much on, because we'll actually talk about being vulnerable, and the way I see it, it's the word I use. It's about being in the flow. So when you're flowing, you're vulnerable because you're being picked up by the current, right? And I say, look, you can either choose to swim with the current or against the current. God's given you the choice, but he's also given you a great amount of resource. So I would encourage you to go with the current because it's very enjoyable, and it's your natural state. It's going to take you to the destination you need to get to. You know, you're trying to get downstream anyway. Downstream is where civilization is. Upstream is all the way up in the mountain. There's nothing up there for you. Downstream is where you want to go. That's where all the abundance is. That's where all the culmination of the minerals, the minerals fly down the river and culminate in the fields where everybody's, you know, they're getting the good stuff. They're letting nature do the work how it's supposed to be. And then they're doing their work and giving back to nature how you're supposed to, and making it a continuous growth cycle. So vulnerability is really just allowing the system to naturally happen, and it becomes a positive feedback loop. So the more you're open to new experiences, the more new experiences come to you, and the more that encourages you to be more open to new experiences. And it just continually builds and builds from there. And it doesn't become this whole like healing crisis that it is for many people, where they're just constantly like trying to face their trauma and like heal their trauma. You've already faced your trauma. It happened to you. Yes, if it comes back, you recognize it. But what happens is people reevaluate their situation, and then they tell themselves how horrible it was. And that's where the emotions come in. That's where the old programs come in, because you're basically just telling your brain, you're telling your emotions, okay, when these thoughts come, I'm supposed to feel like this.
Exactly, yeah.
So you have to break that association, and you do that through vulnerability by saying, oh, you know, I didn't really have the knowledge then, but I'm going to forgive myself for what I did. And I'm basically freeing myself. That's probably the best way I can put it.
And very well put, yeah. I love how you finished that as well. Yeah, vulnerability is that space where a lot of healing does come forth. And a lot of it, maybe actually it's probably best safe to just share from my own journey, per se, but a lot of it doesn't heal. Don't have to heal is the right word, but doesn't heal right away. So it's a process, because programming is very, very deeply drilled into us. It's something that we really need to master, how to manifest things in your life, you know, and also how to be able to unlearn. That's a massive one.
Absolutely.
Learn old habits and then establish new ones, where you'll find that a lot of people tend to not really deal with the past stuff, hence the stuff coming back up when they get into that vulnerable space that they're in, that you shared about, and then try to apply new ideas or new actions, which I have a title for all that stuff, which is pretty much building new masks of positivity. You know, it's like trying to put a new mask on something that you can't, sounds a bit nasty, but you can't be asked to deal with. You can't be asked to deal with your old shit, so you just want to put something new on it and try and like put a plaster on it and hope that it might feel good for a while, but it will come back up because you never dealt with it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Just those habits. So yeah. And it's just programming of your brain. It's not actually your brain. How that's the problem. this is something that I recognise. I recognise that my brain was working very well when these things were happening. I trained it so well to recognise, like you said, you know, when this happens, this is the emotion that is linked with that. When this happens, this is and it kept happening all the time, constantly. And it took time for me to sort of take a step back and recognise that actually my brain is working superbly. Actually, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Hang on a sec, Lee. If I was in a good position where I could retrain my brain and put it in a position where these emotions fitted or were more accustomed to what I wanted, then that, how great would that space feel and be? And it was almost like a, oh wow, sort of moment when I had that. And that was probably a couple of years ago now when I sort of sat down and thought about that. And I'm nowhere near mastering that at all when I say that, but I guess the thought process, the spark of actually even thinking about it was great to have, you know, because I've never thought of that in that way before, you know, recognizing that.
Yeah, they're called complexes.
Right.
Yeah, it's a series of connections. You think one thing and then a string of them come. And those are linked to emotions. Right. And it's very subtle. So instead of saying, you know, let's say that you are feeling sad about something. That emotion is there to encourage you to change your behavior, because you're sad and you're supposed to think, okay, I am sad, but I would prefer that I do this so as not to be sad. But what people do instead is they say, I am sad. How horrible is it that I am sad? Woe is me. They have a pity party. And then they keep reevaluating the small, you know, something really small happened, right? Like your package got lost in the mail or something. Just something little, you know, like maybe your significant other said something that maybe brought up an old memory, something. And what actually happened is actually very small, but you trained your mind to make them a big deal. And to keep reevaluating it, to keep trying to dissect it for more than it is. And all you have to do is untrain that, and instead train yourself to, when you have these negative emotions, it's okay to have them. Like if you never had them, we would call you psychotic, because you have to be balanced. But when you have these emotions, you're supposed to encourage a line of thinking of, okay, what is it that I actually want, so that I can go back to my state of joy that I know is natural to me, instead of saying, wow, I totally deserve that. Like I'm sad and I should just always be sad because I'm always going to be pathetic. Like I'm always, that's like the big word. How horrible would it be if that happened? Even just thinking about something that could happen. How horrible would it be if that happened? Would it really be that horrible?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, totally.
Really? Like, would it really be? Oh, was it just horrible?
Yeah, you chucked me back, and I'm going to jump off of it because I could talk a little bit about it. But this was my awakening in my AA days, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody. But that was kind of one of the things that sort of made me jump out of it, or started questioning it. To be honest, was the box it was putting me in, because you know you introduce yourself saying, "I am Zeke, I'm an alcoholic." I used to sort of just look in the rooms and just be like, okay, so I haven't drunk for like a year, so am I really an alcoholic? Like, in the sense of, like, I thought, this is going on to words, and I was thinking of words and stuff at the time then. I was like, an alcoholic is someone who's actively drinking. Like, it's like, as far as I'm aware, like, why would you be an alcoholic if you're not drinking? Like, if you're not drinking, why would you label yourself an alcoholic? Like, and all these questions were popping. I was thinking, I don't know if I'm supposed to be in this space. This space isn't really giving me the it's not allowing me to expand my well-being, in the sense of trying to find me I found I recognised that I was labelling myself again. So I come out of one environment and just went into another environment that was pretty much packaged and set up for me, and I just applied myself to it again. And it was just like some things. It just felt too similar. Just a different side of the coin given to me. But anyways, that's another story. There's many other instances that I had like that. But I'd love to talk a little bit about your works. Actually, just before that, I'm really intrigued as to why your route took you down to the Vedas route. So, you know, you spoke of going down the Baptist route, and you've read all the religious texts. What ones do you enjoy? What ones have you sort of put to the side now and sort of and left alone? And what ones may you embark in time? I don't know. Like, let me know how the time cycle of your teaching. I'm really intrigued as to how it brought you to the Vedas.
So it happened on two levels. The first one was the food. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
The food.
All right. Yeah.
I cook Indian food all the time.
I love Indian food.
And after going to a temple and eating it, I said, why would anybody go anywhere else? I'm like, they're giving this stuff away. It's free. It's amazing. And so, but, you know, that was just one way of thinking. But in terms of philosophically, I think it was, one, it's my temperament. As a human, this human is very very simple, very I'm a creature of habit, like all of us are. And the big thing that got me was the language. It was the Sanskrit language. Studying the mechanisms of Sanskrit and how it's a perfectly phonetic language, meaning each sound has the same meaning each time. So, for example, if I spell out the word Sean, there you go. Look at that. Yeah, I have something similar to that. But, like, let's take the word bean and the name Sean. Seanbean. You'll find that it's spelled the same but sounds differently.
Right.
So the letters don't actually match to the sound. The sound will be different. In Sanskrit, each letter is the same sound every time. And so it's a very scientific language. It's very, it's also very poetic, and the vibrations of the language, regardless if you know their actual dictionary meaning or not, communicate to your body. It communicates to your soul. It actually says in the scriptures that in the Devachanic kingdom, which means like in the heavenly realms, in the spiritual kingdom, they speak pure Sanskritam. They speak pure Sanskrit there, which means they speak in vibration. They don't have what you would call like a normal human language. And when people go to the Devachanic kingdom and the what they call the gods, or these godly beings, try to speak to humans and they don't know Sanskrit, they actually feel pity for them. Because what that means is they don't actually have the language of the spiritual kingdom. And Seven talks about this all the time. He's alluding to this language that you speak that's not about words, right? He's leading on to that. And that's what's, in my opinion, and from my experience, that's what Sanskrit is. It's a flame language. It comes from the fire.
It's sorry to butt in there. Yeah, it's definitely a language. I always feel like we should be taught this from a very young age, and it's quite interesting that you share the phonetic side of it as well, because for me it would completely squash all dyslexic.
Yeah.
in a standing ideology out the window. It would send it away and it would be gone, because they would no longer, like, the worst language in the world, I think we can all agree on, is English. Hence why you shared Sean and Bean, because it's the only language that can share one word and mean three different things or spell.
And it's only the version of English that we're taught, because English, pure English, is actually also a spiritual language, but we don't speak that. We don't speak pure English.
Yeah.
Like, the English that Shakespeare wrote is much closer to real English than, it's really Anglish, right?
Yeah.
Like Anglo-Saxon, like, you know, that it really is very poetic and beautiful too, but we don't speak that anymore.
Broken English, I like to call it, to be honest, what we speak.
Yeah, and then the third aspect that got me into the Vedas was the actual masters of it. So the masters of it, you know how you have Shivananda Saraswati, you have Bhaktivedanta, who wrote the Science of Self-Realization, who wrote translations of the Gita, who wrote translations of the Bhagavatam, these great works. You have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You have, I could go on, but I connected to all these masters, all these great, and they all came from that same background. So it just was very easy for me to connect. I'm somebody who, I very much attract teachers in my life. I've learned from so many people. I never really follow one person. I follow what feels right to me. In the Vedic system, it's a threefold path. You need Shastra, which is scripture, but it really means written testimony, because the scriptures were written by rishis, who are seers, people who saw the absolute truth, who actually had spiritual vision and wrote what they saw so that others could attain the same, get on the path. And then you have Acharya, which means teacher. You need a bona fide spiritual master. You need somebody who's actually tread the path so they can correct you and make sure, and for your specific temperament, to make sure that you stay on the path and you don't fall off. And then the third word, I don't know the Sanskrit word for it, but the third one is, it needs to make sense to you. So I call it intuition. It also should make logical sense to you. If it doesn't make logical sense to you, then it's not right. And it doesn't have to be fancy, like complex logic. It's very simple logic. The Buddhists were defeated by the Vedantists in many aspects due to the Buddhists using these complex logic of how everything was just void and there is no self. The very simple argument would be, then who are all these practices for then? You know, there's certainly a personality to life, and that's just obvious. We all have personalities.
Right.
The fact that you want to deny your personality is a different story, but that's not logical. So it has to make sense to you. It has to be logical. So when I heard that, I said, well, I'm going to stick to this. Now, that being said, there's still in this society a division between East and West. If you tried to follow the scriptures verbatim right now and you lived in the West, it would not be possible. Because, for example, the scriptures tell you to do yoga properly, you need to go into a secluded area in the woods, and you need to have a very simple place that you live, and you need to do yoga by yourself in isolation for long periods of time. Well, back then, if you wanted to go somewhere plentiful and that you wouldn't have to worry about food, you would live in the woods. Because the woods, you just had fruit just hanging from trees. It was so abundant in nature that it really wasn't a big deal if you went out and just lived there. You chose to live in society if you wanted to be a householder and have a societal life. But nowadays, it's not like that anymore. There's very few places now that you can go and just live off the land, having not doing anything to it. So it's not conducive to Western temperament entirely. That's why Prabhupada came to the West and built temples. Right? He built temples here so that you have a ecosystem to work with and and follow this path. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Vedas are for everybody, but it's assuming the Vedas, you have to read them in context. So they're written back then for people back then. They are written for us now too, but they told us in the scriptures, in this age in Kali Yuga, you cannot go out to the forest and just do meditation. It's very difficult. The actual vibrations of the atmosphere are not conducive for it. It's very difficult to concentrate. I'm sure you can attest to this, just trying to concentrate for a few seconds. Your brain just goes off. So they say in this age, the method of self-realization is chanting the holy names of the Lord. Is chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Because it's engaging your senses. It's engaging you're looking at a picture, or you're looking at something, you're using your mouth, you have incense or something. It's using all of your senses. You touch, you have mala.
Yeah,
right?
Cool.
And you can dance and sing, kirtan as it's called. You can, it's very easy to do. Anybody can do it. You can have your normal job that you do, but chanting inside. And now all of a sudden you're doing karma yoga. You're practicing devotional service to God. Chanting the names is called a sacrifice in the scripture. That's not only you can do these like rituals if you want to, but Krishna says one of the great sacrifices you can make is chanting my names. So what that means is you're spiritualizing yourself by using these mantras, these Sanskrit mantras, to change your inner vibration. And chanting the names of God, of the Absolute, is basically like tuning your body to the Oversoul.
Right.
And Prabhupada explains all of this in his literature. So reading this, I said, yes, like, this works for me. I'm going to do this. Like, that makes sense to me. And it makes sense to a lot of people.
And it does. The way you've explained it there for me, because I've looked into mantras, and I've never been solid on a lot of things. I've been the type of individual that's dipped my hands into too many things, probably, which becomes a problem in itself, because then you don't end up doing nothing, or it doesn't feel like you're putting enough input into one or all of the areas at all. But I definitely looked into mantras, and it was something that resonated with me and made a lot of sense, recognizing that vibration was something that was very, very powerful and is around us constantly. Energy doesn't die, vibration doesn't just fade away and disappear or go in that sort of manner.
Right.
And it continues and flows and bounces back and comes around, whatever. But how you explained that was very, very interesting. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So that's sorry, is that your finishing touches there on Vedas? And how long have you been doing Veda and working with the scriptures there?
So I started reading the Gita when I was about 18 years old. I'm 22 now. So in terms of time, it's been 4 years in this lifetime. However, and this is just a belief, I can't confirm this, but I know that I've studied this before, because I just had, while I don't know the language like very well yet, I just knew how to. I knew how to say the words. Like I knew the words just came very natural to me. The philosophy was just very natural to me. Uh, as a child, you know, I sung and I sang Hallelujah and I did all those things. It's a very natural thing for me. So, um, and if you know, according to my master, we've been doing this on this back and forth thing for a long time. So this is part of my path, my soul path, and um, it definitely feels like home to me. So, but in terms of this lifetime, yeah, it's been about 4 years studying it, and just really just doing it, just just chant and be happy. That's what Prabhupada says.
Nice, nice, and I get that, and I do generally get that feedback from you, from the energy that you're portraying. It generally does bring some sort of humbleness, some groundedness into you, and just comes out. So it's really, really nice to see that, and comforting, really, to just be in that, to be in that space with yourself. So
I do those demonstrations a lot with my clients, people I work with. Like, I just go, all right, we're just going to sit down real quick. We're just going to chant for like 5 minutes. And then I just want you to tell me how you feel. And universally, people are just like, because you're connecting to the source of all bliss, of all things. They say in the scripture, his name and him are non-different. The name of God and God are one. So when you say the names of God, you are making association with him. You are in communion with him. You are actually loving him, and so he loves you. The law of karma comes right into play there, and you just can't help but like be happy, and then you don't. The mind stops, and you don't have any reason to be happy, and that's the best kind of happiness, in my opinion.
nice, nice. Okay, let's share a little bit about your works, and then we'll delve into a little bit about the nooks and crannies of attempting to simplify spirituality, which you touched base on, and how spirituality seems to be part of a, what do you want to call it? It's an area which is being used to make a lot of money out of.
Yeah, it's another market.
Let's just put it that way. It's a marketplace. So that's something we'll touch base on after and see how we can sort of merge that into something and leave a loving, positive note on the end of it all, as always. So Vedic energy healing. I'm not totally clued up as to what this may be. So maybe you can just touch base really with what this is and how you use this in your works as well.
Sure. So, you know, when I made that, I really just needed something to give out to people. So I was kind of sitting in terms of right now, what I do, what would I say that I do that in the shortest possible amount of words would explain it to people. So I said Vedic energy healing. It sounds like the Vedas have a certain energy which give healing, which I would agree with completely. But what I really mean is that I am doing energy healing in the context of the Vedic knowledge.
Okay.
So in context of the Vedic knowledge, this energy comes from God. And this energy is coming from God, and I am uttering a mantra, which is like tuning the radio, which is my body, to God's frequency as close as I can, and then transmitting that to the individual. And, you know, you've read stories of Jesus, how he puts his hand, you know, and heals the blind, the sick, the cripple. He was doing that. He constantly had a mantra going here in his heart. You know, Ram, whatever you want to call it. He had he had that that Christed vibration in him always, so he would transmit that to other people. So what I'm doing, it's almost like a training for me. I'm training to, I aspire to be like Christ in that regard, to transmit that healing as pure of a vessel as I can. So the work that I do, if anyone's familiar with Reiki, it's very much done to the hands, and you're using certain geometric symbols to transmit power to the individual that you're giving healing to. And geometry is words and geometry are the same. So if you look at the symbol, the Choco Rei is the power symbol. It's the first symbol you learn in Reiki. It looks like this, up, down, in a spiral. That's a word, right? Choco Rei is a phrase in Japanese, but it's also a symbol. You know, so too do yantras. Yantras are geometric symbols of mantras, and mantras are words which are representing a vibration. So all these physical manifestations are a reflection of the spiritual energy. So it's incorporating all of these factors to channel energy to a person to help heal them. And that's the work that I do.
Great. Just curious one, maybe you can answer it, but obviously yantra and mantra literally sound the same. So I'm assuming that the ANTRA means something, and then the one and the M and whatever is like added in the front. Like, can you?
Yeah, let me actually. I think there's one in here.
You got Tantra, Yantra, Mantra. It's like, well.
Yeah, here, I'll actually get my card to show you.
Okay. There's a link to all of that. So while you're finding that.
So you know what a mandala is?
Yes, but please explain.
Yeah, so this is a yantra.
Yes.
And this yantra is the geometric equivalent of a mantra. And you can say vice versa. So a mantra is a phrase or a word. And the word mantra, the closest definition to mantra in English is password.
Right.
So it's actually a password of accessing an energy. So you have the picture of it, you have the phrase of it, and then you have Tantra. So Tantra is actually the what you would call the embodiment of this energy. So it's the actual practices. It's the actual tantric. You know, you have tantric yoga. So tantric yoga is a set of practices involving breathing, asana, concentration, visualization, and these are the outward manifestation again of this spiritual energy which is expressed through the human body. So you have mantra, yantra, and tantra, and these all three are really the same. Like I said, just various forms of the same thing. And so it's basically like having a bunch of batteries and you're charging this person with energy. Like these crystals here, you know, these crystals all have a certain geometric pattern associated with them on a micro scale. And based on that pattern is going to be the way they transmit energy. So light comes through them and then is refracted or reflected or filtered through a certain way. So too is the same with these yantra, mantras, etc. And these are like the tool belt for the healer, which I believe everyone can be.
Right. And it's Is this something you would recommend people to learn?
Yes. I would recommend that you experiment with yourself. Like, you are a mantra. You are a vibratory being. You're made out of frequency. So whether you know it or not, everything that you learn is learning about frequency. The difference is your source. So when you're learning about mantra come from the rishis. Mantra come from the great masters who have given us this gift of accessing these higher energies. So when you learn about mantra, you're learning about energy just like you always are, but you're learning, imagine it's like going to McDonald's versus going to a 5-star restaurant. It's still food, but it's not the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, that explained quite a lot, actually. So, Reiki Geometry?
Right, same idea. So, yes. Reiki is a tradition that was created in the 1800s by a man named Dr. Usui. And to say it very simply, he received a bunch of geometric symbols just like this one and was instructed to use these symbols to heal people, to give healing. And that's how Reiki became popular. He taught it to his disciples, and then his disciples went off and spread it. And that manifests as the Reiki that we have today. Rei means God, and Ki means energy in Japanese. And that's the tradition. And so not only am I using the Vedic mantras and the yantras, but I'm also using the geometry and the language from the Reiki tradition. Because they're really one and the same, but they do bring a power element to them. Also, Reiki is something people know about. And it's when you're making a card, when someone sees something that they know, it's more inviting to them and it's familiar. And
marketing perspective, obviously.
Yeah, this is my first time ever making a card, so it's definitely not the best one that I could have made, but I made it. It's ambiguous enough that it gets people asking, and I really think that's good enough.
Got one, so that's great. This one was really interesting. I wanted to know a little bit more on this one for sure, which was third eye scanning.
Yes. So my master has actually taught me and has initiated me into the art of body scanning.
So just before you go on with that, there is no machine involved in this other than the machine of you.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. While I do believe that with this knowledge you can create machines that would do this, that would be much more effective than the ones that we have now, yes, you're correct. I don't use any sort of mechanism. I'm only using my organs.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I'm scanning the body, and I'm still very much in being trained in this, but I can see different problem spots that somebody might have. Give me one moment, please.
Okay.
That was just my roommate. As I was saying, I can see to a general degree the energetic structure that's going on with the person and essentially just say, hey, this is happening. And my master really guides me on all this. This is probably the best route that you could take to help heal yourself. Here's, chant this mantra, please, and All right, 1 second. Sorry. Okay, so I give them essentially, and this is a very case-by-case basis. I would see something, and then I would tell them, look, this is the problem I'd be having. I work with diet a lot, food, and just say, drink, do this. I'm not a doctor, not claiming to be a doctor. Like, I'm not giving any medical advice, but I recommend that people do something to help put themselves more in balance. This is what the readings are. Like, I use tarot cards. It's like a set of instructions essentially to see what's going on. The tarot cards were designed to, while most people think it's for like telling the future, the tarot cards' first intention was to develop the psychic faculties. So, yeah, that's the one you want to go with.
Yeah, that's the one that I've been told to go with, and I jump into many things, and I haven't touched base with most of it yet. So I'm yet.
Yeah, you'll get there. No rush.
So yeah, please continue. So third eye scanning that's quite powerful. How are you enhancing yourself with? Okay, first of all, how are you able to keep your third eye active, or is it a position? Are you in a position where you can sort of access it or open it up as you see fit, or is it something that happens with the celestial bodies? You're working with the lunar cycles, the sun cycles.
Yeah, well, the goal of yoga is to get you onto bigger and bigger cycles.
Right.
So I'm in a cycle where it's very much like a download. So my third eye, in terms of like what I do personally for my efforts, is I just try to keep it as clean as possible. I drink clean water. I drink clean as much organic food as I possibly can get, as pure food as I can get. I try to limit my consumption of information that is contrary to my path. I try to make sure I sleep very dark. In terms of the physical level, it's just taking care of the brain, taking care of this frontal lobe here, which I still have a lot of work to do on. But and then in terms of using it, reading the scripture and chanting, for me, keeps it very active because it's cleansing the energy from here. Prabhupada says the best way to control the mind is to chant the Maha Mantra. So when you chant this mantra, it's all here in your headspace, and it doesn't allow for anything which is not of that vibration.
I can resonate with that because just going off of something today, like, for example, I think we all have that habit. A certain music track started playing on a radio. I was at work, and I kept humming it. I kept catching myself out, and I was like, I don't want to be singing this in my head, but it just kept coming out like a broken record. This is going off track a little bit, but I decided it wasn't so much a mantra, but I decided to count in my head, and it was almost like my brain was saying, what the hell are you doing? What's this? What's this? And then eventually it faded out, and it allowed that to sort of eventually fade away and get out. So what you're exactly sharing is by putting in that new vibration or familiar vibration that you want in there. It's disconnecting away from the external noise and allowing you to drum in and find. Okay, that's really, really interesting. It makes
the third eye is just like an eyeball. It has cones and rods in it, just like your eye. So just like your eye, you got to keep it clean. You got to make sure the lenses are not scratched. They're not clouded. They're not covered in dirt or dust or whatever. Internal dust, which would be thoughts and different mind stuff that flows here. and then you just got to keep using them. So you can't lose that which you've never had. So you just got to use it. And I also am very blessed to say that, you know, I have somebody who is instructing me and giving me inspiration. I'm not doing this by myself. So that's a very big key. Your master will find you. You do not choose your master. Your master will come to you. And you just have to be ready. You just prepare yourself, and it will happen. And you'll be. It's the process of initiation. And right now, the Earth is being initiated, so many people are having third eye experiences. Just take it slow. It's not about opening your third eye, because, I mean, you know, I don't leave my front door open all day. Like, just as I don't leave my front door open all day, I don't leave my third eye open all day. It's not really meant for that.
Words, yeah, totally makes it. You think of it in a completely different manner when you say it like that. Yeah. Okay, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And going beyond seeing issues or being able to use it to heal individuals, physically, possibly mentally as well, spiritually. What else is it good for personally for you? Does it allow you to engage in things or have a higher awareness of? Does it create a higher probability of you gaining what you desire in your life when you are in a higher frame of mind?
Right. I would essentially say it's allowed me to be much more discerning in life, actually. It allows me to see things for what it is and not get caught into traps, really. Just not get caught into things that would drain me of my energy, that would take things away from me. And I'm definitely not saying I'm perfect. I'm still definitely working through a lot of things.
Totally.
But you know, you like what my master said in the quote. Spiritual people see how material people behave. They understand why. So I would say that's, at least to a degree, that's what I can do. I can understand why people behave a certain way, while they might not understand why I behave a certain way, and that's okay. That's definitely primarily what it's done for me. And then, you know, it keeps my faith strong whenever any sort of manifestation happens. You know, in terms of third eye manifestation, it's just those are gifts. Those are signs. I don't create them. I don't make myself have them. That's given to me by spirit. And so when those things are given to me, it's just another sign to keep going, just to keep going on the path. And it keeps your morale high. And everybody gets signs and signals exactly when they need them. So there, you know, you don't have to like try to like, you don't have
to. Okay, yeah. I just wanted to touch a little bit more, because this is something that I'm looking into, and if you want to call him a teacher, because I think he is, and I have subscribed to his works online, which is Michael Tsarian, and he's quite big in his tarot work and a lot of spirituality as well. So it's someone that I follow quite a lot at this moment, and will do for many years, I would presume. But
very good.
Tarot, I'm very intrigued. How did you embark on this? Was it the lady that you spoke of at the beginning that spoke of your grandfather? Was it your grandfather?
Yeah. Yeah, well, she used the tarot deck with me, and she introduced it to me, and then I explored it on my own.
Interesting. And because this is it was Michael Tsarian that's really connected me more and more to this and made me see it more for what it is. I can't remember the other power tarot deck that he showed. It's not Alistair Crowley, is it? Alistair Crowley. There's another set deck. I don't know. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm yet to go through with this and have a deep dive in it. Call it that.
Very good.
Mum was into this as well, funny enough. So there's a part of me that's reluctant because I thought of asking her about tarot, and I don't know why I don't want to ask her, but I don't know why. Maybe I'll question it another time. But I think my time's coming soon for me to maybe get my reading done. I've prolonged it for long enough, so it'll be quite interesting to see what it's.
I'd be happy to do one for you. They're very fun.
I'd appreciate that. Why not? Definitely. Why not? I think that'd be great. Definitely. Okay, interesting. Well, a couple of other things. I'm going to chuck this one out there because this is one that's really, really touchy. And the topic is food. Now, simple question. Is food connected to spirituality?
Absolutely. And it is alive just like we all are. Very simply put, the body in Sanskrit is called annamaya kosha, which means food body. So your body is literally made out of that which you consume. It's an accumulation of what you have consumed. And your body is the temple of your spirit. So if it's full of dead carcasses, your body is the temple of a graveyard. Whereas if it's full of life, then your body is a temple of life. You know, it's just very simple. That's all there is to it. It's not any more complicated than that.
Very interesting. Okay, and quite well put. Now, what is interesting is the idea of there seems to be a massive issue in many communities that I've seen to be following or be part of through social media and stuff like that. The idea of the killing of meat or animals and the disconnect, I would say, of how the same treatment is or can be with plants. Now, I'd like to know your idea or response to this because I'm more plant-based, you know, and I've been like it for another couple of years and I'm transitioning still. You know, now and then I admittedly might have like a blueberry muffin or something that might have dried egg in it. I've just actually started a second job. I work in a restaurant and sometimes I just do a mad shift and I bring fruit to work with me and I break basically and I'll have maybe some chips or something or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But I feel, or I strongly believe that I'm the idea of killing animals and whatnot is uncalled for. It doesn't need to be done. I get it. Do you know what I mean? I totally get that. But breaking it down and sort of stepping away from the killing side of things, aren't we doing the same thing when it comes to, you know, eating our herbs and our roots? It's the same. It's exactly the same thing, and a lot of people don't sort of see much.
Yeah, it is actually the same principle.
Yeah.
So not only is it the vitamins and the minerals of food that gives us nourishment, but it's the prana in food that gives us nourishment as well. So when you cook food to oblivion, you're destroying the prana in it. Now, that's not to say all cooking's bad. Ayurvedic techniques, you put fire into food, you can actually enhance its pranic life. But the essential point is that you're absorbing the prana within the food. And so when you offer food to God, you're actually letting God enjoy the food before you eat the food. And when you do that, you're basically eating the leftovers of God. When you eat the leftovers of God, that food has been charged with energy, very strong energy. And so the purpose of food is to nourish you and to make you strong and fit. And really, people have gotten lost and would rather satisfy their palate than their body. And that's really why there's this huge disconnect, because it's such a mental gymnastics thing with food that we have to do it one way or the other way. It's really about getting the prana from the food. That's what's most important. It's a process. It's building materials for our body. Yes, we do. You do have to kill the plants. Absolutely, no doubt about it. It's just there's a couple factors that go into it that make it a more conducive lifestyle. One is that plants don't have the same kind of emotions that animals do. They don't have the same kind of intelligence. So the intelligence of an animal, the complexity of its genetic code, determines how easy it is that it assimilates into our body. So plants have a much more simple genetic code, therefore it's much easier to assimilate to our body than an animal. The other one is the emotions. And they've done this experiment before. If you take a plant and you tell it, "Thank you, I love you," you send it that love vibration. The plant will have what you would call a calm demeanor. They just measure the electromagnetic activity of the plant, and they found that when they're about to go eat the plant would actually show signs of stress, right? But then when you prayed to the food, that stress signal would go away. And, we all have to die, but we can all either die calmly or we can die freaking out. And what's important is that your food dies, and knowing that it's not really dying, it's just you're actually turning it into you. You're making it you now.
Very beautifully put. Thank you. Yeah. Very, very beautifully put. And it's an area where a lot of people are getting, I'd say it's a mass confusion. They can't accept, and it's a horrible, maybe we need another word rather than killing. And probably do, because we associate it with so many things. People watch many films and, watch the news, and killing obviously creates this whole red affair and all this sort of stuff. But they can't connect it with the idea of, stripping a plant or herbs or like how is cutting the grass not the same as like not I don't
it really is.
And when I say this to people, they sort of say, I've had this said to me recently. They said, "Are you mad?" Like literally, "Are you mad?" Like with a long ass text, as if like I'm going off the rockers. And it's just like, just don't think you get where I'm coming from. Like I appreciate where they want to become.
Right.
They almost want to float and be unaffected and not affect anything, which basically means you're not real. You're not here. But to be able to live, you need what's that? There's a little saying, isn't it, about breeding destruction, but it's all connected. There's a cyclical cycle, and it's personally your intention that's put into play that makes a difference. That's the way I see it. And I mean, rightly said, like this is what our ancestors used to do, is they were praying or sending supplications, we say, to the food and to whatever they were using to whatever it may be. Even if they were meat eaters, they would still bless the food, if you were not bless. Yeah, well, it would be the food, and then they'll use the skin for this or that, and they'll eat the meat, and the family would eat. And and I had to put that one in there because I'm not a meat eater. Like I'm still transitioning. I don't eat meat anymore. But there's people out there that are still transitioning and eating meat, dairy, whatever it may be, and and taking that next stage slowly with the right, what I'm trying to get at, with the right information, with the right information. It's very important that if you want to for the consciousness of as human species to be able to evolve, is to not put them in a box, you know, because I think that's a lot of that's been happening, especially with this whole vegan movement, which really upsets me, to be honest. Like, I don't know, it just gets a bit too much after a while. I just think, I'm not quite sure where they're going with it half the time.
It's just ego getting inserted into something that doesn't need to be there.
Right. Yeah, I just had to get that one out there because it's just upsetting to just feel that energy. Maybe that's something I need to work on, but yeah, that big.
Buddha, there's a great story about Buddha where a man's throwing insults at him for hours, and the Buddha just sits there, you know, doesn't do anything. And the man starts to grow tired, and the Buddha goes to his disciples and says, "Won't you give this man some food and drink? He is tired." And then they give him food, and then he continues to insult the Buddha. And then the man says, "Wow, you know, I am thoroughly impressed. You did not, what I said did not affect you at all." And he said, when somebody gives somebody else a gift, they can either receive the gift or leave it. And if the person leaves it, to whom does the gift fall upon? It falls upon the person giving it. So I was simply exercising my choice. That's all.
Oh, man. Yeah, a lot to learn, Bob. I've got a lot to learn. Yeah. Beautifully said again. Simplifying spirituality.
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued. Yeah, you're rubbing your hands. I'm really intrigued where you're going with this and how it's taking shape for you at the moment. It's got to be quite in-depth.
The very simple truth is that everything happens within you. So if somebody does something and makes you feel a certain way, that feeling comes from inside of you. So spirituality is not about, you know, being a monk or like going certain place or doing a certain thing or having a certain name or having a certain system that you do. What's important is how you manage yourself internally. That's it. I think psychology has a lot to do with that. Just seeing how the mind works and understanding how it works and how you can, in a healthy way, change it to something more pure or more sentient, what's called sattvic, or sentient. And then just doing things that bring you joy and realizing that anytime you have some sort of reaction to something, that is totally 100% an internal mechanism, and that you have the ability to let go of that and create something new if you want. You are not a victim of your own circumstances. The stars impel but do not compel is the phrase that goes. You can forgive yourself of all the karma from the infinite of your past lives if you want. Like, yeah, you did it, but you can keep.
Yeah, you can show me this one. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, well, that's really it. Like, you just do what makes you happy. Simply put, in my opinion, having a master is a requirement. When you get to the more advanced stages, at the beginning, you're actually just setting yourself up to have a master. To have a master, you need to be somebody who's humble, who listens, who can listen to direction. You need to be able to be adaptable to outside circumstances. You need to be like a child. Just the qualifications are what Jesus said: "Be ye as a child, seek the kingdom of heaven." And then after you have cultivated those kind of personality traits and those kind of modes of being, then your master will come into your life, and then you will literally be taught up, down, up, down, how to be you, because every person has their own perfect alchemical composition. They have their own perfect blueprint, and the master knows your blueprint, and so all he's doing is instructing you on how to put yourself back together again.
Right.
And that's the basis of spirituality. All the rest of it is mental gymnastics. All the rest of it is it's just I can't say any other word for it, but mental speculation. It actually talks about this in the scripture. There are people who do things to get a certain result. They want material benefit. There are mental speculators, and then there are devotees. You know, the first two fall prey to the material world because they lack knowledge. And why do they lack knowledge? Because they don't have a bona fide master giving them the true meaning of Scripture. Even if you read the Scriptures, if you're reading it from somebody who's not pure, then they will taint its meaning inherently. So that's why when we read the Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're reading it according to, we're reading it in accordance to a bona fide master. So it touches a lot of people because it's coming from a pure source. The original meaning of the text is not lost. So that's, and you'll also hear people say, well, you are your own master. Yes, but that's a much deeper thing than you think. That doesn't mean that, you know everything for yourself, because none of us do. We all need help for each other. But on a deeper sense, yourself involves more than just you, this person. So your master is an extension of you. So in that regard, your master actually lives in your heart. So yes, you are your own master, but your ego is not your master. That's kind of and the ego, you hear ego get thrown around a lot all the time. The ego is a verb, okay? The ego is not a noun. The ego is not a thing. Like, it's not, I can't like open your head and find your ego and pick it out. Like, it doesn't exist. It's a mental activity. And if you recognize it as a mental activity, then you can calm the activity down when it's overactive. And that's really all you're doing. You can't kill your ego, because your ego is just like it's a process. There is no killing involved, because the ego isn't even a thing. There's nothing to kill. Right? I mean, yes, in one way you are killing it, but that just means you're stopping it. You're just stopping its activity. It doesn't actually exist, though.
Very interesting.
So that's really the basis of all, in my opinion, of spiritual teaching. It's very...
and this is something that you're, I'm sure it's going to become more deep-rooted, and you'll master it in some shape or form in text or in meanings when you share it in your teachings with your people that you teach and heal and help, whatever else. And I haven't really heard it spoken of in that sort of manner. I kind of just get it from people sharing whatever spiritual exercises that they have and implementing it to you. And that's it, do you know what I mean? So I quite like how that's come across. That's pretty cool, actually. Let's just touch base on this last topic here, because I know I'm keeping you. And it's spirituality and it being used as a marketplace today. Now, obviously, your line of work is in the areas of teaching and healing and improving one's wellness or well-being, and I know that the process almost comes hand in hand with actually showing them kind of how to do the processes as well. So you're not almost sort of just you don't earn money by just healing people. You're showing people as well, which is beautiful. I could be wrong, but I don't feel like a lot of people generally give that sort of guidance, should we call it, to people, hand in hand with actually healing them at the same time. So spirituality in the marketplace, you share with Gaia and we're both connected to secret energy, which is a massive massive, expansive, and ever-growing platform. I have to say that I haven't used to its full potential myself personally, but it was one thing that definitely helped me get involved to where I am now, and still sort of search and seek. And you know, I've found interesting people just like yourself because of Secret Energy. You know, how is it affecting your lines of work? This whole idea of spirituality in the marketplace, and how do you implement it? Because you have to be part of the marketplace as well, I presume. Because
right.
You know,
so the philosophy that I have with it, and this is something that I've talked about with my master before, is there's nothing wrong with accepting money. The only reason why we have an objection to it is people are using this money based off of spiritual teaching to gratify their senses or to gratify themselves. And I've definitely made this mistake before. You do it almost unconsciously sometimes. People are not paying you for the information, they're paying you for your time. So for example, yoga, I'm being trained to teach yoga. Yoga I do by donation because I can't sell yoga, right? Yoga is an ancient system, and that system is free. Anyone can read about it for free and know about it and know exactly how to do it. What people are giving me money for is the time that I've spent to show them and to compensate me for the work that I've done for them, right? And, you know, I'm not very hard about it. If someone needs healing or someone needs guidance, they don't have any money, I'm not going to turn them away. But because of the system we live in now, right now we just live in a currency-based system, and that's how people contribute. You know, back then it was barter trade. That's how they contributed to you. So my philosophy is that people are not paying me for healing because I'm not doing the healing. That's God doing the healing. People are not paying me for even the guidance because I'm being inspired to say these things. Like, I'm not the one who's actually like pulling the information out of them. The information's being given to me. So all these things are gifts. But what I am sacrificing is my time. Right? My time, I could choose to be doing something else, but I'm choosing to do this. And so I'm asking, in exchange for the time that I'm spending, this is how much I think my time is worth. And while I don't think it's worth a certain amount in dollars, because I live in the West and because people actually want to place a value on what I'm doing, the only way they know how to do that is through money. And if I'm receiving healing, I want to value that healing and say, this is very helpful for me. I'm investing. This is something I'm investing into for myself. So for many people, that mode of investing is through currency. Right. And so in that regard, I think it's perfectly okay to accept money in that regard. And it's just a means of this, like, you know, not too much expenditure. You know, just not too high and not too low. Before, I wouldn't take money, and my practice wasn't working because people weren't actually valuing what I was doing for them. You know, they're kind of taking it for granted because it's free. Nothing's really free. And then, you know, some people just charge ridiculous amounts. And that's because they're using that money for themselves, depending on who it is, not everybody, but they're using that money for themselves instead of into a good cause. So like even temples charge for their books. They'll have restaurants and they charge people for their food, but the money's going back into their organization. And so that's why it's successful. You know, that's okay. That's how you know it's working. And so it's just finding that good balance. And just really not using spiritual knowledge for your benefit. That's just the more important part of the whole spiel. Yeah. As long as you're using it to continue to grow and expand whatever it is that you feel called to do, then I believe that's okay.
Yeah, totally. I'm seeing a cyclical cycle going on here again, where I can that you rightly put out. There's I've shared this before in a couple of shows where there's a linear approach of how people are processing things in their lives, and in this instance, you know, if the money isn't, obviously, yes, you pay yourself and look after yourself, because if you're well, then you can help others, obviously. But there's got to be a cyclical cycle happening there where, you know, it's balancing itself out. That karmic balance is at ease, you know, and I guess that's why the marketplace in spirituality is so disruptive at the moment, because clearly it's very linear. There's money going in, as in we're putting money in for services, and it's sort of just dropping off the edge.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, people are sort of left thinking, what's going on here? Like, and that's where that disruptive going. That's where I feel, you know, quoting Savan Boma again, and fair play on him. Little way to go yet, but, you know, hopefully people will get the idea soon of the whole idea of earning karmic debt and free karmic debt.
That's where the whole idea of sacrifice comes from, right? Because people understood that their food, their water, everything that they needed for life was given to them by nature. So naturally, to keep it going, they need to give something back to nature.
Absolutely.
That was the whole purpose of sacrifice.
It totally makes sense. Like, it relieves, going off to the idea what we were talking about earlier of the whole meat and herb thing and how it's still killing. I mean, that's why plants work so well. If you kill an animal, you can't bring it back to life. You can't put it back in the earth. And it doesn't work like that. But with plants, if you look after them, they can keep replenishing. You know what I mean? Keep going. You know, that's why they work very, very well with us. They come, you know, so that karmic debt, if you want to call it, is more balanced. You know,
absolutely.
Cycles coming back. Kill an animal, it's dead. It's not coming back.
Absolutely.
So, wow, that was beautiful. That was a long time coming, my friend, and
yes.
I'm sure we'll definitely have some more talk soon. But amazing, yeah, really chuffed that I actually got you on. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch base on, or end the conversation on, to our beautiful viewers that will see this? Maybe you want to leave with a particular saying or a supplication or something, or mantra perhaps.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you very much, and honest for just being here. I'm really humble. I'm really happy that you came on, my friend. Honestly, I don't think there was a moment throughout this whole recording where you just weren't smiling. You just weren't in a good place, and it's really nice to just be here with yourself. So, you know, that being said, this is the Need to Crosstalk show. Yes, it is Zeke Dorset. Signing it off with Mr. Brendon Jones. What a show. Thank you very much. Wholeness.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.